All right. Excuse me. Continue on with the story from the last video. I was talking about how in convenience stores, as compared to say like factories, one person uh, getting sick, calling in sick, or whatever, not showing up for work, can ruin it for everybody. Well, the second one is that they want you to be extremely honest. So, no shoplifting, no taking stuff without paying for it. Handling hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars, which I have done, without messing with it. And you don't get paid a whole lot. Now, I know the reasoning behind it. Cashiers, they are not expected to be extremely technical or well educated. You know, most places require a GED equivalent or a high school diploma to work as a cashier. Some places, that's all they require to work at least mid-level management, such as a crew leader or shift leader. So you don't need a whole lot of knowledge or education. Because of that, they also believe that they don't have to pay you too well, because you don't have that higher education. However, when you're dealing with, on a regular basis, hundreds of dollars, and like I said, some cases thousands of dollars, and you're barely making enough to live on, and that's only if you're by yourself and you're living with your parents sometimes. When your paycheck is $210 a week, and you've got rent to pay, and you got your upkeep on your vehicle, and the insurance for that, and of course, nowadays with Obamacare, you're supposed to carry medical, and they tax you for that. And then you've got, upkeep on your vehicle, gas, and stuff like that. Yeah, that $200 a week, $210 a week does not stretch too far. So you got to be, or the company wants you to be extremely honest. No shoplifting, no stealing from the drawer. But you don't make a whole lot of money. Yet you see this hundreds of dollars every day coming through your register. And a lot of places nowadays have 2 or 3 registers. So hundreds of dollars through a couple of registers, and you got to be honest. Got to be honest about it, and not take it. Sometimes that temptation for some people can be a little overwhelming. So I've watched people be hired and fired just within a few days because of things like that. And so how do we get people to be honest, or get honest people working there who can do the job and will do it at least decent? Probably a little more pay, and there are a couple of places excuse me, dry throat. There are a couple of places where they do pay pretty decent, but most of these places, minimum wage, no bonuses, and a lot of them will try to keep their full-time employees down so they don't have to cover them with insurance, because you got to have a minimum amount of employees working for the company before you have to provide insurance. So a lot of these places will have the manager full-time, the assistant manager or the crew leaders full-time, and maybe one full-time cashier, and then everybody else is part-time. That way you don't have to put insurance on anybody. So they're very stingy with the money at times. And to show this, and I'm not, like I said, not all places, or not everybody's like this, but I'll give you an example. place I was working at, we were making just like 5 cents over minimum wage, and that was the crew leaders. The cashiers were all making minimum wage. And I'm sure if the owner could have got away with it, they would have been making less than that. But minimum wage, the crew leaders were making slightly above that. I had been there a year, and I was making about 10 cents over minimum wage. And I got a 5-cent raise when I became a crew leader there. So one day, the boss had asked, our manager had asked the owner about raises, because, you know, there have been people there longer than me who were making the same as I was. Been there a couple of years. So the boss asked about raises. And the owner told him that we were barely making a profit. He was barely making anything off the businesses, and he owned 4 stations at the time. Barely making anything, so he couldn't afford to give anybody raises. A couple weeks later, he shows up to show our boss his brand new boat that he just bought for something like $30,000. Oh, and he had to buy a brand new pickup to haul the boat because his old pickup just wasn't going to do it. But he's barely making anything off the stations. So, couldn't afford to give us a raise, but he could afford to go out and spend $70,000 on a new boat and a new pickup truck to haul it with. Yeah, we really didn't like working for this guy too well. And finally did get a raise, but that was only because at that point they raised the minimum wage like 15 cents, so we got a 15-cent raise. But that was it. Just what minimum wage went up, we got exactly what minimum wage went up. Well, I'd been there about 2 years, a little over 2 years at this point. And at this point, there was one person who had been there longer than I had besides the station manager. And she had stepped down to cashier from crew leader where she was at when I started. So now she's just cashier. So I am the most experienced crew chief. I've been there for a little over 2 years. I've been a crew chief for about 2 years. Well, the station manager went on vacation, and he put me in charge of taking care of all of his paperwork and stuff while he was gone. So part of that is the armored car to pick up all of our receipts and stuff and the cash and credit card slips came in once a week. I had to take our deposits across to the other station to drop them off because that's where the armored car picked everything up. And the boss told me, it just as training kind of, he's like, always vary your route, don't always do the same thing all the time. He goes, so one day walk it across over to the station, because it was just over on the other side of the road is where our other station was. He says, just walk it across to the other station. All right. He goes, another time, drive it over. He goes, third time, drive it and go a different route. He goes, so you don't want to keep doing the same thing all the time, because people who realize what you're doing can then figure out what your route is and stop you. So, all right. Well, when I took 4 days worth of deposits over, I took in cash and checks, just cash and checks, didn't include the credit card slips, just in cash and checks, I took $64,000 across to the other station for the armored truck to pick up. 4 days, $64,000. And this guy wasn't making any money off of us. And that was one of the 4 stations he had. Now, it was at this point that I realized why our station manager did some of the things he did. We sold cigarettes out there. And this was back in the mid-90s, 94-ish, 95. We were selling them out there for $5 a pack. You're on the toll road, you run out of cigarettes, you need one really bad, what are you going to do? A lot of people would pay that $5 for a pack of cigarettes. You could go to your local store and you could buy a carton of cigarettes for $10. So I would see the station manager come in every couple of weeks with about 4 cartons of cigarettes. Whatever he sold for the day, he would replace out of his cartons and then take the cash out. Now, we also had a register where you could not ring anything up but gas. So you had to keep track on this little pad of everything that you sold so that you could add it all up at the end of the day to account for your money in your register. But he would bring in like 3-4 cartons of cigarettes, replace what we sold, and take the money. So he would sell, 8 packs of cigarettes and cover what he had bought, and the rest was just profit for it. Well, I also noticed he would do this on oil. He would go in and he would buy a case of oil, of quarts of oil, for like $8, $7, $8, and we sold them for $2.50. So again, he sold less than a quarter of the case, and he made his money back, and the rest was all profit. Now that was took a little longer because we didn't sell oil as fast, and there wasn't near the profit margin on it. But it was at that point, after all this had happened, that I started to understand why he was doing that. Because that was a little more cash in his pocket by doing that, because the owner was extremely stingy. Now I will say, about 6 months after this happened, our station manager did quit, and he went to another job that he managed. But he had just gotten to the point where he was so tired of where he was working at, he couldn't stand it anymore. I mean, we used to come in the mornings, and the first thing we'd do is, as soon as we heard the boss start grumbling under his breath at the customers, hey, why don't you go change trash, sweep the parking lot, wash your truck, anything to get you out of the store for a couple hours so we can work in peace. And we didn't care how busy it was. We wanted him out of there because we knew that shortly after the grumbling and stuff began, he would actually start making comments, and some of them weren't real nice, and most of them were probably not fit for a customer to hear. Now, he had actually worked in this business, for this particular business, for something like 25 years. So it took him a while, but yeah, it got to the point where he really did need to get out of it and change jobs. But low pay, and there is a lot of work associated with it. So you have a lot of stuff that does go on with work, and a lot of people don't realize just how much is actually involved with working at a convenience store. And again, I know some starting to get a little close to that time limit thing, so it looks like maybe a part 3. Yay! Yeah, I know, you're so excited, right? You just love to hear this old fart here talk.